Okay, today we're working with section 2.4, dividing rational numbers. So the rules for dividing rational numbers are pretty much the same as the rules for multiplying rational numbers. If you're dividing two numbers with the same sign, then your quotient will be positive. And quotient, remember, is the answer to a division problem. And if you're dividing two numbers with different signs, the quotient is negative. So let's just take a look at a few examples. If we have, for instance, negative 100 divided by 10, that would be a negative 10. Because we have a negative sign and a positive. Negative divided by a positive, that would be different signs. Therefore, the quotient is negative. So that's why we have a negative 10. If, on the other hand, we were to divide two numbers that were both negative, like negative 90 divided by 5, then the answer would be a negative 18. But if it was a negative 5, it would be a positive 18. So when we have two signs that are the same, then we have a positive quotient. Same sign, quotient is positive. That's what we have here, same sign, so therefore the quotient is positive. This isn't too bad. We also have to remember, part of your worksheet will have fractions on it, so we have to remember what we do with fractions. So with fractions, if you were to take, for instance, I'm going to use the example from the worksheet actually, negative 5 1/3 and divide it by 8. Okay, first of all, we have to remember, first thing we should do is take the mixed number and make it into an improper fraction. So to do that, we're going to take 3 times negative 5 and then add 1 to it. And actually, we're going to worry about this negative later. So it's really 3 times 5 plus 1, and then we'll make it negative in the end. So 3 times 5 is 15. 15 plus 1 is 16. So we have 16/3. And it's a negative 16/3 because this is negative. And we're going to divide it by 8. Okay? First thing we have to remember is that 8 is the same thing as 8 over 1. So how do we divide fractions? You simply multiply by the inverse of the second number. So the inverse, or the reciprocal, of 8 over 1 would be 1 over 8. So we're going to multiply by 1/8. Okay, when we do that, 8 goes into itself one time, 8 goes into 16 two times. So we have 2 times 1, which is 2, and then 3 times 1, which is 3. And because we had a negative divided by a positive number, then that means that the quotient, or the answer, will be negative. So the answer is a negative 2/3. So let's take a look at one more example with fractions before we call it a day. So if we have, let's say, negative 1/3 divided by, let's say, 4/3. And let's make it a negative 4/3 this time. Okay, so negative 1/3 divided by negative 4/3. What do we do? Well, that would be a negative 1/3 times the inverse of 4/3, which is 3/4. And we have to remember that it's negative. Okay, so when we multiply these together, our 3's will cancel out. So we have a negative times a negative means that I have a positive answer, and then the only thing I'm left with is 1 over 4. Okay, so same thing would be true, decimals. You just have to remember the rules for decimals. Some of you are probably going to want to use a calculator, I would imagine, when it comes to some of these decimals. And for some of them, I don't blame you. I think that would be appropriate. Sometimes, though, look for compatible numbers, look for things that go into each other easily, and maybe you don't need to have a calculator for all of them. So that's about it for today. Just remember negative times or negative divided by a negative is a positive divided by a positive is a positive. But when you mix signs and you have a positive and a negative, then your answer is going to be negative. So the only thing you should find challenging maybe is some of the fractions, and that's about it. So hopefully this helps, and we'll talk more about it tomorrow.